Thank you very much. Greetings and many thanks to the organizers. I am a Ukrainian born in Georgia and I am citizen of Ичкерия. We are first victims of so-called Russian Federation. Not only empire but a criminal state attacked Georgia in December 1991. So we have wider view how Russian propagandists used to work during war in Chechnya. I want to ask you a very simple question. Why are media figures representing the aggressor country, Russia, still present in Ukrainians' information space? No, I didn't misspell it. They represent the country that sponsored terrorism. You might argue that they are now in opposition to the Putin's regime and therefore they are allies of Ukraine. But this is the whole idea of the simple plot, a crude calculation approach of these opinion setters to work now with the Ukrainian audience. The danger of this substitution of notions is that these figures bring the properties and elements of the Russian world to Ukrainian society, trying to replace the values of the nation-state with a system of mafia oligarchic society that was formed in Russia in the 90s. The irony of it all is that the very same people who have become hand-wringers in Ukraine today were behind the media support of the criminal power of Yeltsin and then Putin. To show you the degree of the problem we face now, I will focus on two typical characters of the Russian media industry, although there are many more. One of these characters is Alexander Nevzorov, who has been granted Ukrainian citizenship, and he's waging an information war against his newfound homeland Ukraine. Another media persona is the food blogger Veronika Belocerkovskaya, aka Antonisheva, aka Protopopova, a representative of St. Petersburg gangster mafia boss Kostya Могила, Kostya the Grave. From the first day of the founding of the new Russian state, under the slogans of democracy, the mafia community came to power, which was fused with the newly formed authorities. One of the main faces of the new Russian identity was St. Petersburg. The key figure of the construction of the criminal state was Anatoly Sobchak, a KGB man who rose of the top ranks of the so-called democratic opposition to the old Soviet functionaries. The technology was implemented at the first Congress of the USSR when Sobchak was appointed a chairman of the commission to investigate the tragedy of 9th of April 1989 in Tbilisi. Then Andrei Sakharov, who was involved in the investigation, died suddenly in December the same year, coming close to the revealing information about poisons creating in KGB labs. And Anatoly Sobchak, who used the resonance in this tragedy to take control of the democratic movement, the results of the work of this commission were a complete cover-up and the absence of those who were punished. Moreover, General Rodionov, one of the key figures of the mass murder of citizens, became a Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation in 1996 during Chechen War. While the KGB was forming a legal power in the new democratic Russia, a second power, a power of criminals, was being forming in parallel. In St. Petersburg, this power became the first. It is not by chance that the stable expression "the night governor of St. Petersburg" was come to be. It refers to Vladimir Barsukov, the boss of the Tambov mafia. But let's go back a few years. In the early 90s, the country was undergoing a redistribution of the media market. In place of the sometimes naive journalists with idealistic views who had come into the wave of perestroika, the market was taken over by mafia bosses. In St. Petersburg, the owner of major television channels was the criminal mastermind Kostya Могила, Kostya the Grave. It was he who appointed representatives, media managers. The freedom of speech at the time consisted of the freedom of choice for the journalist to take money from the mafia or suffer a baseball bat to the hand. It was these new media managers who became Yeltsin information support during the war against Chechnya. And Nika Belocerkovskaya, Belanika, was such a media manager in Kostya Mogila's empire. In 2003, Kostya Mogila has murdered, and the entire empire of industry was taken over by Tambov mafia in the heads of Vladimir Kumarin-Barsukov, who was directly connecting to Vladimir Putin. And here we come to the figure of Alexander Nevzorov, who was not only a propagandist who formed the image of Chechen terrorists and bandits, he was Putin's confidant, and he was a member of the Russian State Duma, and he made Barsukov Kumarin, mafia boss who sought legalization, their assistant. In the 2000s, he reached absolute power. No business could have existed without him. Many people will say, this is all the past, everything has long since changed. You are gravely mistaken. Nothing has changed. Why it's so important to dwell on this particular mafia community? Because it is they who today are in the highest position of governance of the criminal state called Russian Federation. The myth that crime is over in St. Petersburg because Vladimir Kumarin has jailed for 24 years, it's nothing but a myth. Kumarin was brought into the shadows by agreement with Putin because, as you know, Putin likes to give everything a form of legality. And he needed to formally get rid of the criminal connection he inherited from the mayor of St. Petersburg, Anatoly Sobchak. The fact that the investigation of the high-profile murders were stopped because Kumarin took them all over suggests that this was a planned operation. So what is the role of these characters we have chosen for our example, Belocerkovskaya and Nevzorov? Apart from the function of legalizing the gangster community and seizing the media market, their super task was to form a dumbed-down society, devoid of criminal thinking, and to destroy the beginnings of civil society. They created an atmosphere in which the middle class and the business community in Russia were ashamed to express their civic position. Everything was subjected to ridicule and money bullying. I am not interested in politics, and I don't have a political stance, was a trend formed by Belonika. The media space was segmented together with Russian patriotic resources, which today we have become the main megaphones of the war, such as Solovyov, Skabeyeva and Simonyan. There was a segment of Echo Moskvy, Dozhd and Novaya Gazeta, theoretically liberal, which worked for a pseudo-intellectual audience. And the third segment was the glamour trend, which Belonika was a representative construction in the criminal Kremlin regime. With the beginning of a full-scale war in Ukraine, two parts were no longer demanded in Russia and went directly to the West to carry out a special operation planned by the same masters. It is obvious that the name Good Russians has stuck exactly to these agents of Kremlin influence who continue their work on a new front to fulfill specific task to whitewash criminal in the West. Some have moved to Ukrainian information space, and the most terrible thing that they carry technologies and deceivings the Ukrainian audience previously tasted in Russia. They should not be deceived by their anti-Putin and anti-war rhetorics because their characters do not have and have never had a moral imperative. Everything they do is reduced to a single goal, special operation. It was already done in Georgia when the wave of Moscow glamour and distorted information completely seized the media space in Georgia and nullified the resistance movement against the Moscow occupiers. I must stipulate that there are characters I have chosen that are most prominent. In fact, there are many more, and their masks behind which they hide the fangs of the Russian worlds are diverse. But the question is how much the Ukrainian society is willing to allow such abuse. One part of Russia is killing Ukrainians, and other part is conducting subversive activities directly on Ukrainian television channels. Thank you so much.